Hey everyone, it's been a while since I posted anything. Just taking a break from the blog for a bit, but I've still been shooting and editing, so I thought I'd go through some of the recent photos I've done and do a write-up along with this. So we'll start off with this one. This is from South Beach on Salmon Island. It's taken at sunset, of course. Originally I shot up on here, but I didn't really have quite a wide enough angle to get the shot I wanted, so to salvage the evening, I just walked up and down the beach a little bit, and I found this log. Of course, it was 50 feet away from where I was. And it turned out to be the better shot anyway. But what I was trying to capture was the surf coming up and hitting the log, spilling over, going under, that sort of thing, along with the sunset. So normally, when you have a sunset picture like this shooting into the sun, you get a shot like this. It's a nice silhouette, but it's not really that awesome. This is really underexposed. The sky is pretty good. The sky's okay, but there's no detail and the water's kind of meh. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, get exposed for the shadows, but then the sky's completely blown out and unusable. If you go halfway, it's not bad. You could probably salvage this in Lightroom pretty well, but by using Photoshop and luminance masks, you can create an HDR image that has the full range of tones and does not look like one of those HDR images that's completely overprocessed, or like Photomatix Pro or something like that. So we'll head over. First, I'll go through the settings. So I used an 18mm lens, 1/4 f/22. I didn't have an ND filter, so I had to shoot at a really high aperture to get a low shutter speed, which would blur the water. Wish I could blur the water a little bit more, but oh well. So 8th, 4th, 8th. I think for the ones I actually used, it was 1/8, 1/4, and 1/2. Sort of just experimenting around with shutter speeds. So there's a couple different bracketed sequences I did. This one might have been nice to include in, to have some of the water here, but I just kept it simple and used these three. Might go back in and add some more water in, but that's okay. I think this image turned out really well. So we'll go into Photoshop and see what I did. So luminance masks, while this is opening, it's basically a selection of different tonal ranges of the image. So you can select just your highlights or your darks, something like that, which is really, really useful, because then with that selection made, when you're painting in with a brush, the selection acts as guidelines. So if you just want to paint in the shadows and you have a selection of just the shadows, you won't affect the highlights. So when I started off with this bottom image here, I wanted to just paint in detail in this area. So I took a selection of just the darks, see the white, and then when you paint it in, it only affects this area. And then same with using brighter exposure. So I'm only affecting the areas I want. Do this if you look in the channels. These are the selections that you can make. So if I were to select this, these white pixels, if you select it, the blacks would be excluded. So if I were to paint right here, only the rocks and the logs would come through on the layer I was painting on. The sky wouldn't be affected at all. This is super, super useful for merging images like this. So I use that for just compositing the three base images. Give you, selecting just an idea of what the masks look like. I think I used those darks, like 2 or 3, which is a pretty selective adjustment of the darks, but as you can see here, it works really well to make a nice clean edge here. I feathered it a little bit more on the water with that one. So if I turn that off, see, if I would have feathered it on this one, it would have really overexposed the water. So I just used the ground and then the log with this one. Okay. Then I went through and added color to the beach. I just selected a color from the clouds using the brush, then hitting that option key, and you can select a color. And then just paint it in over, set it to soft light. And then I think I excluded it just from the water here, just because the shadow wouldn't have that color, but the water and the ground it's having direct light from the sun would. Then I just darkened up the sky a little bit, add a little contrast, just with a curves adjustment. So that's just your standard sort of S curve. Raise the highlights, lower the shadows. Then brighten it up a little bit. Just brighten up the shadows mostly. You can see, keep doing that. It's mostly affecting the shadows. I made a selection of the darks using one of my luminance masks. Then I used that for the layer mask. Then I deselected and then painted in more with a big soft brush over areas that I wanted it to be more effective with. So the end result was it not affecting the sky as much as the water and then the shadows. So that's just a way of brightening up the shadows a little bit. And then I also did the same thing with this little patch of water down here. That was pretty simple. I think I just used, big soft brush for that one. Then I set my white and black points. You can do that in a couple ways. What I did is use the threshold. What you would do, I have to deselect my selection. It's a constant problem when you hide selections. So you'd select all the way to the right. And this is always going to be overexposed. So I just left my white point as that. But for your black point, go all the way over here. And then you go until there's just some black showing. You make take your eyedropper tool, make a point there, a sample point. And then you do the same with your highlights, just where there's beginning to be white. And what you're doing there is making 2 points that you can then go into the curves adjustment layer and select these eyedroppers tool, and then when you click on the white one, this sets your white point, and then click on your white selection point, it's telling Photoshop to make that tone the brightest part of the image. Okay? So if I didn't have any information over here in the histogram, and the brightest white was just sort of a gray, if I were to select that gray wherever it was in the image, say it's this cloud, if I were to select that and then set that as my white point, it would move the whole information over so that that gray point was now pure white. And it's a way of improving contrast. So it makes the same way with the black. So you can select this black in here, and even though it might be a gray beforehand, when you set that as your black point, it's going to move the information down so that that is then your darkest black. Normally, if you have it just on normal, it also is a way of color correcting. However, since I have 3 different layers and a lot of other curves layers, it doesn't really work out as well. If you look in the sky, that probably makes it actually a more realistic sky, but in the ground, it doesn't really work. So what I did is I just used the luminosity blend mode. And so it's just affecting the tones of the image and not the colors. Then I finished off with 2 vibrance layers. This one just has a simple gradient layer mask, white on top going to black. You can see that, just select that, drag white to black, really simple. Then I made another duplicate of this, made a black layer mask, and then just painted in with a brush over the water that I wanted to give the vibrance on. Really simple. No luminosity mask or anything like that. It looks like a lot of layers, but really the techniques I'm using here, starting off with the base image, all I'm doing is looking and say, okay, with this image right as it is, the shadows need to be brighter. So then I brighten the shadows. Then there needs to be more color. So I added more color. Then the contrast is a little off. So then slowly I worked my way in doing contrast adjustments until I had this. And then I thought, okay, tonally that looks good, but now let's work on the colors. Overall, the color tones look okay, but they could be richer and more vibrant, so then I just used vibrant and bumped that up. So it's not really this textbook, recipe. It's just looking at the image, determining what you want to change and how you want to change it, and then doing that one at a time. Completely dependent on the image, and it does take a little bit more time than some things, but I think you get a really good result, and you don't have to rely on memorizing steps and rules and all this stuff. It's just using your eye and your experience to know what you want to do with an image.